What if Atlanta's season is in trouble before it even begins? Rumors are swirling that the Falcons' new leadership is already questioning their young quarterback, and tensions behind closed doors may be rising fast. Is this about strategy, or is something deeper starting to fracture inside the organization? It started with a whisper, not a press conference, not a headline from the team, just a report that quietly began circulating among league insiders. According to multiple reports, Kevin Stefanski has been pushing for Atlanta to consider bringing in another quarterback, not as competition, not as depth, but as a potential shift in direction. And that's where everything changed. Because this isn't a rebuilding team searching for answers. The Falcons just invested heavily in Michael Penix Jr., draft capital, public commitment, a clear message that he's the future. So when rumors suggest the head coach may already be exploring alternatives, fans don't see strategy, they see doubt. Now, to be clear, nothing has been officially confirmed. The organization hasn't publicly stated that Penix is on the hot seat, but reports claim internal discussions have taken place about adding a quarterback who could challenge the current trajectory. And in today's NFL, language like that carries weight. Some fans believe this is simply smart roster management. Bring in competition, raise the standard, protect against uncertainty. Others see it differently. They're asking why a young quarterback would face this kind of pressure before even being fully established as the starter. That question spread quickly across social media. Within hours, debate exploded online. Was Stefanski trying to protect himself? Was this about trust in Penix? Or was it simply a coach wanting flexibility in a league where quarterback play determines everything? The timing is what raised eyebrows. Atlanta's roster is one of the youngest in the league. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. This offense was clearly constructed with growth in mind, a long-term build, a patient development arc, so introducing uncertainty at the most important position feels, to some, premature. And here's what makes the situation more intense: Stefanski's history with quarterbacks. His tenure in Cleveland featured constant turnover at the position. Injuries, benchings, controversy. Some of that was out of his control, some of it was, but perception matters, and that perception followed him to Atlanta. So when this rumor surfaced, it didn't land quietly. It reopened old debates. It revived past criticism. And it forced Falcons fans to ask a simple but uncomfortable question. Does the head coach fully believe in the quarterback the franchise just invested in? That uncertainty is powerful, because in the NFL, once doubt enters the building, it rarely stays contained. But that wasn't the full picture. Long before Atlanta, there was Cleveland, and that's where this conversation really gains momentum. Kevin Stefanski's time with the Browns was defined by instability at the most important position in football. During his tenure, more than a dozen quarterbacks saw meaningful snaps, some due to injury, some due to performance, some due to front office decisions that reshaped the roster overnight, but regardless of the reasons, the optics weren't great. It started with Baker Mayfield, early success, a playoff win, momentum building, then injuries, inconsistency, and public tension followed. Eventually, the relationship fractured, Mayfield was moved. The narrative shifted from promise to reset almost instantly. Then came the Deshaun Watson era, one of the most controversial quarterback acquisitions in modern NFL history. Massive guaranteed contract, league scrutiny, suspension, pressure from every direction. Stefanski had to manage not just football but headlines. And while some argue he handled a complicated situation professionally, others believe the constant turbulence exposed deeper cracks in the offensive structure. And then there was Joe Flacco. Late in the season, Flacco stepped in and unexpectedly energized the team. The offense looked freer, vertical, confident. Fans began asking uncomfortable questions. If a veteran off the couch could produce like that, what had gone wrong earlier? Was it the system, the chemistry, the quarterback evaluation? That stretch didn't erase previous struggles, it intensified the debate. To be fair, many analysts defend Stefanski. They point out that injuries plagued the Browns for multiple seasons, that roster control wasn't solely his responsibility, that quarterback chaos often starts above the head coach, and they're not wrong, the NFL is rarely simple. But perception lingers. When you have that many changes under center, fair or not, development becomes part of the conversation. Did quarterbacks improve under his system, or did they cycle through without long-term stability? That question now follows him to Atlanta. Some fans believe Cleveland's instability was Stefanski's fault. It was organizational chaos. Others believe patterns matter. And when reports surface suggesting he may already want quarterback flexibility in Atlanta, those Cleveland memories resurface fast. Because here's the truth, quarterback confidence and coaching trust must align. Once doubt creeps in publicly, it changes the temperature inside a building. And in Cleveland, that temperature rarely felt steady. So when whispers began in Atlanta, they didn't exist in a vacuum. They echoed. The moment Kevin Stefanski's name became linked to Atlanta, one voice cut through the noise almost immediately: Cam Newton. Cam didn't wait for controversy to explode. He addressed it early. On his platform, he questioned the fit, not in a loud, chaotic way, but directly. He pointed to Stefanski's track record with young quarterbacks and asked whether Atlanta had fully considered the long-term implications. And that's when the temperature started rising. Cam referenced what happened in Cleveland, particularly the handling of Shador Sanders. Now, to be clear, interpretations of that situation vary. Some analysts believe Sanders simply wasn't ready. Others argue he wasn't given a real runway to grow. Cam's stance leaned toward the latter. He suggested that the environment around Sanders never fully positioned him to succeed. Those comments didn't go unnoticed. Social media amplified them instantly. Clips spread across platforms. Debate followed. Some fans praised Cam for saying what others wouldn't. Others accused him of jumping to conclusions too quickly. But whether people agreed or disagreed, one thing was undeniable: he framed the narrative before the season even began. Cam's broader point wasn't just about one quarterback, it was about patterns, about development philosophy, about whether certain young quarterbacks receive patience while others face faster scrutiny. He didn't present hard accusations. Instead, he posed uncomfortable questions. And questions can be powerful. Are we sure this is the right environment for another young QB? Have we seen consistent development under this system? Those were the kinds of conversations echoing online. Then Atlanta drafted Michael Penix Jr. Suddenly, Cam's earlier comments felt more relevant. Some fans believe his warning looks more serious in hindsight. Others argue it's still too early to draw any conclusions. After all, no official decision has been made about replacing Penix. No benching has occurred. No public conflict has surfaced. But perception drives momentum in the NFL. Once the idea enters the public space that a coach may not fully believe in his young quarterback, every move gets analyzed through that lens. Every practice report, every interview answer, every rumor. And here, what made Cam's comments stick? They weren't explosive. They were calculated. He didn't attack, he questioned. He challenged Atlanta to think long-term. Now the fan base is split. Was Cam sounding an alarm? Or was he reacting too soon? That debate hasn't faded. If anything, it's grown louder as speculation around the quarterback position continues to swirl. Because when a former MVP publicly raises concerns, people listen. And that's when the conversation quietly shifted. Here, where this situation gets even more complicated. The Atlanta Falcons didn't casually draft Michael Penix Jr. This wasn't a late-round flyer. This wasn't a backup plan. This was an investment, a statement, a declaration that the franchise was ready to build around a young quarterback and commit to a long-term vision. Drafting a quarterback that high sends a message across the league: this is our guy. And that's why the recent speculation feels so jarring. Penix wasn't brought in to look over his shoulder from day one. He was brought in to grow with a core that's already in place. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, a young, explosive offensive nucleus designed for development. Chemistry and patience. This roster isn't built for a short-term rental at quarterback, it's structured for a timeline. That timeline matters. Quarterback development in today's NFL is fragile. Confidence is currency. Trust between coach and quarterback is everything. When a franchise spends premium capital on a passer, the expectation isn't instant perfection, it's gradual elevation. Mistakes are part of the process. Growth is the goal. So when reports suggest internal discussions about adding another quarterback with the potential to shift direction, it doesn't feel like standard depth planning. it feels like uncertainty. Now, to be clear, teams bring in competition all the time. That's not unusual. What's unusual is the timing. Penix hasn't even had a full runway as the undisputed leader of the offense. There hasn't been a full season to evaluate him in Atlanta's system, yet the conversation has already started. Some fans believe that's proactive management. In a league defined by quarterback performance, you prepare for every scenario. Others believe it sends the wrong message, especially to a locker room full of young players watching closely. Because here's the reality, when ownership drafts a quarterback that high, it's not just a football decision. It's financial, it's strategic, it's branding, it's belief. Arthur Blank didn't authorize that pick without intention. The Falcons have been methodical in assembling this roster. They've added skill talent, they've prioritized youth, they've structured contracts to allow growth over multiple seasons. That doesn't align with panic. And that's why this situation feels bigger than a simple roster debate. If the front office believes in Penix long-term but the coaching staff wants immediate flexibility, that creates tension. Not public drama, not yet, but philosophical friction. Win now: urgency versus developmental patience. Control versus commitment. The Falcons' investment in Penix represents more than draft capital. It represents direction, identity, stability at a position that has historically defined the success or failure of this franchise. And once you signal belief publicly, walking that back, even subtly, changes the energy inside a building. Because quarterbacks don't just need talent around them. They need alignment above them. And that's where this story starts getting uncomfortable. Now the spotlight shifts upward. Because when tension surrounds a franchise quarterback, the real question isn't just about the player or the coach, it's about alignment at the top. And in Atlanta, that means Arthur Blank. Blank isn't a distant owner, he's visible, involved, invested. Over the years, he's built a reputation as someone who values stability but expects direction. When the Falcons commit to a path, it's usually intentional, calculated, long-term. That's why this rumored divide feels significant. If reports suggesting quarterback uncertainty are even partially true, it introduces a classic NFL power dynamic: owner vision versus coaching philosophy. And those two don't always move at the same speed. From a business standpoint, drafting Michael Penix Jr. wasn't a small move, it was a public declaration. It told the league, the locker room, and the fanbase, this is our future. Owners rarely make that type of investment without conviction. It shapes ticket sales, marketing strategy, and long-term planning. Coaches, on the other hand, operate on a different clock. They're judged weekly, sometimes daily. Their margin for error is thinner. A slow developmental year can cost them credibility. So when a coach looks at a roster, the question often is, where will this team be in 3 years? It's, can we win right now? That difference in timeline creates pressure. Some fans believe Stefanski, if he truly wants quarterback flexibility, may simply be protecting his ability to compete immediately. Others believe that approach undermines the very investment the organization just made. Neither perspective is outrageous, but they don't coexist comfortably. And here where it gets complicated. In the NFL, when ownership and coaching aren't fully aligned at quarterback, things unravel quickly. Players notice it, assistants sense it, media catches hints of it. Even subtle disagreements can create ripple effects that grow over time. There's also the optics. If Blank publicly backs Penix while the coaching staff appears hesitant, that sends one message. If Blank defers entirely to coaching adjustments, that sends another. Either way, perception shapes reality in this league. Now, it's important to stress, no official conflict has been confirmed. No statement has been released suggesting friction, but rumors alone are enough to fuel conversation. And when those rumors involve the most important position in football, the stakes amplify. Because quarterback decisions are rarely just football decisions. They represent power. They reflect trust. They signal who truly controls the direction of a franchise. If Stefanski believes adding another quarterback strengthens the roster, he may view it as responsible leadership. If Blank believes unwavering support is critical for Penix's growth, he may see that move as premature. And that's where philosophies collide. The Falcons don't just need talent, they need unity, clear messaging, a consistent direction that players can rally behind without second-guessing. Because once internal uncertainty becomes public speculation, the conversation expands beyond strategy. It becomes about authority. And in the NFL, authority battles rarely stay quiet for long. This is where things get delicate. Because beyond ownership meetings and coaching philosophies, there's a room full of players watching all of this unfold. And in the NFL, locker room perception can shift faster than any headline. Quarterbacks aren't just play callers, they're tone setters. When a franchise drafts a young quarterback like Michael Penix Jr., the expectation is clear: this is the leader we're building around. Teammates adjust to that reality. Receivers train with him in the offseason. Offensive linemen protect him differently. The culture begins to center around that identity. But when rumors surface suggesting uncertainty at that position, even if unconfirmed, it creates subtle tension. Players hear everything. Some fans believe competition sharpens a locker room, bring in another quarterback, raise the standard, make everyone earn it daily. That mindset has worked in certain situations across the league, but there's a difference between healthy competition and perceived hesitation from leadership. And perception is powerful. If a young quarterback senses doubt from the coaching staff, it can impact confidence. If veteran players sense instability, it can affect trust. Nobody wants to commit emotionally to a direction that might change mid-season. Now, to be clear, there is no confirmed report of locker room division in Atlanta. No public comments from players expressing frustration. But NFL history shows that quarterback ambiguity tends to ripple outward. Receivers start wondering about timing and chemistry. Offensive coordinators adjust play calling to protect uncertainty. Defensive leaders quietly question whether the offense can keep up. These aren't dramatic confrontations, they're subtle shifts. And subtle shifts can define seasons. There's also the broader cultural conversation that's been circulating online. Some analysts and former players have discussed patterns in how young quarterbacks are evaluated across the league. That debate is complex and layered. It deserves nuance. What matters here is not accusation, but awareness of how narratives shape perception. If a young quarterback struggles early, fans often debate whether he's being developed correctly or judged too quickly. That conversation has followed multiple teams in recent years. Atlanta now finds itself entering that space, whether it intended to or not. Cam Newton's earlier comments added another layer to that discussion. While opinions vary on his stance, his central point was about support, whether young quarterbacks are fully empowered or quietly questioned behind the scenes. That idea resonated with portions of the fanbase. And when fans begin framing a situation through that lens, the locker room feels it. Because players don't just respond to coaches, they respond to belief, to stability, to clarity. The Falcons' roster is young: Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. These are players entering prime development years. A stable quarterback presence accelerates growth, uncertainty slows it. Again, nothing official suggests chaos inside the building, but the mere existence of this debate changes the atmosphere. It forces conversations, it invites speculation, it adds pressure to every practice rep and preseason throw. And here's the reality: culture isn't built through speeches. It's built through consistent action. If Atlanta fully commits to Penix, the locker room will feel that alignment. If hesitation lingers, even quietly, players will sense that too. Because in professional football, belief isn't just motivational. It's structural. And when that structure wobbles even slightly, the entire building adjusts around it. But here, where the conversation takes another turn. At some point, this stops being about depth charts. It becomes about philosophy. Because when a coach reportedly explores alternatives at quarterback this early, the question shifts. Is this about accelerating development, or is it about maintaining control over the direction of the team? Those are two very different motivations. On the surface, bringing in another quarterback can be framed as responsible roster management. The NFL is brutal, injuries happen, expectations are immediate, coaches are judged on wins, not patience. From that angle, adding insurance looks smart, even necessary. But context changes everything. Michael Penix Jr. wasn't drafted to sit in a revolving door system, he was drafted to be the foundation. When a franchise invests heavily in a young quarterback, the unspoken agreement is simple: we'll live with the growing pains, we'll commit to the timeline, we'll build this the right way. So when rumors suggest that timeline might already be flexible, fans start asking deeper questions. Some believe this is about development style. Stefanski has historically leaned towards structured, system-driven offense, precision, timing, controlled reads. If a quarterback doesn't adapt quickly to that framework, tension can form, not personal, not dramatic, just philosophical. Others believe it's about something more subtle: leverage. In the NFL, control over the quarterback position often defines control over the team. If a coach fully embraces the drafted quarterback, ownership's vision becomes reality. If a coach pushes for alternatives, it shifts influence back toward the sideline. Again, no official power struggle has been confirmed, but the optics matter. There's also the win-now factor. Coaches don't operate on 3-year guarantees, they operate week to week. A slow developmental season can put a coach on the hot seat fast. So from Stefanski's perspective, if reports are accurate, securing flexibility might feel like self-preservation. And that's where the debate intensifies. Is he protecting the franchise from uncertainty, or protecting himself from risk? The answer likely depends on who you ask. Media voices are split. Some analysts argue that no quarterback should be handed anything in today's NFL. Competition is healthy, earn it, prove it. Others counter that young quarterbacks thrive under stability, not suspicion. There's also a historical layer to this discussion. Across the league, we've seen young passers either blossom under patient systems or collapse under constant doubt. The difference often isn't talent, it's alignment. When coach and quarterback grow together, the ceiling rises. When they operate cautiously around each other, the offense tightens. Creativity fades, trust erodes. And trust is everything. If Penix feels fully empowered, he plays free. If he senses evaluation every week beyond normal standards, that freedom narrows. Quarterbacks can feel when they're being measured differently. Now, none of this guarantees conflict. It doesn't even guarantee disagreement. It simply highlights the tension that can exist when timelines aren't perfectly synced. Development requires patience. Control demands certainty. The Falcons appear to be standing at that intersection. If Stefanski believes adjusting the quarterback room strengthens competition, he'll frame it as strategic growth. If Arthur Blank believes unwavering support is essential, he'll prioritize stability. Those aren't opposing values, but they don't always move together. And that's what makes this moment so pivotal. Because once a narrative forms around control versus commitment, every decision feeds it. Every signing, every practice report, every subtle quote in a press conference. The league has seen this before, situations where alignment at quarterback determines not just a season, but an era. So the real question is whether Atlanta adds another quarterback. It's whether everyone inside the building is pulling in the same direction when they decide. Because if they are, this becomes a footnote. If they're not, it becomes a turning point. Here, where this situation becomes bigger than rumors, bigger than speculation, bigger than one off-season decision. The real stakes aren't about who takes the first snap in week 1. They're about what direction the Atlanta Falcons choose to lock into, and what that decision signals for years to come. Because quarterback decisions don't just impact Sundays, they shape eras. If the Falcons double down on Michael Penix Jr., publicly and privately, the message becomes crystal clear: this is our guy. Mistakes will be tolerated, growth will be prioritized, the offense will evolve around his strengths. That kind of commitment builds stability. It gives a young quarterback room to breathe. And when quarterbacks can breathe, they develop. But if uncertainty lingers, even subtly, the pressure multiplies. Every interception becomes louder. Every slow quarter becomes a referendum. Instead of building momentum, the narrative becomes evaluation. And evaluation changes how everyone operates. If Penix thrives despite the noise, the story flips instantly. The organization looks patient, visionary, unified. Stefanski, if he embraces that success, looks adaptable and strategic. The controversy disappears as quickly as it formed. But if Penix struggles early, critics will circle back to these rumors. They'll ask whether belief was ever fully there. They'll question whether confidence was shaken before it could solidify. Fair or not, that narrative will resurface. That's the risk. There's also the coaching angle. If Stefanski pushes for flexibility and ownership resists, tension can build quietly. And in the NFL, quiet tension rarely stays quiet forever. If a coach feels boxed into a developmental timeline he doesn't fully trust, play calling becomes cautious, decisions become conservative, the offense tightens. On the other hand, if ownership sides completely with coaching adjustments and the franchise pivots too quickly, that creates a different problem. Young players notice when leadership changes direction abruptly. It signals instability. And instability at quarterback is one of the fastest ways to derail a promising roster. Remember, Atlanta isn't rebuilding from scratch. They have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, a core that's entering critical development years. Windows in the NFL are shorter than people realize. If the quarterback situation wobbles, that ripple affects everyone's timeline. There's also the financial reality. High draft picks are investments. They're structured around rookie contracts that give teams flexibility. That window, typically 4 to 5 years, is when franchises try to maximize value. If Atlanta hesitates too long, they waste development time. If they pivot too soon, they risk abandoning potential. It's a narrow path. And then there's perception around the league. Players talk, agents talk, coaches around the NFL observe how organizations handle their young quarterbacks. Stability attracts talent. Chaos repels it. The Falcons' handling of this moment will shape how future free agents view the franchise. That's not dramatic, it's business. If Atlanta projects alignment, they strengthen their reputation. If mixed signals continue, that uncertainty lingers beyond this season. Ultimately, this isn't about proving Cam Newton right or wrong. It's not about validating rumors, it's about clarity. Does this organization believe in its drafted quarterback enough to endure growing pains? Does the coaching staff see long-term potential or immediate limitations? Those answers will define more than just a depth chart. They will define trust inside the building. They will define the relationship between ownership and coaching. And they will define whether this young roster grows together or grows cautiously. Because in the NFL, quarterback decisions echo for years. And whatever Atlanta decides next won't just affect this season. It will shape the future of the franchise. The league is watching. At the end of the day, this was never just about Michael Penix Jr. It's about belief. It's about alignment. It's about whether everyone inside the Atlanta Falcons organization is moving in the same direction or simply hopping things work themselves out. Because quarterback situations don't implode overnight. They unravel slowly, through subtle doubt, through mixed messaging, through small decisions that, stacked together, start to feel bigger than they should. Right now, Atlanta stands at a quiet crossroads. On one side, there's commitment, a young quarterback drafted to lead, a roster built around speed, explosiveness, and long-term upside, a vision that suggests patience and development. If the Falcons stay locked into that plan, they send a powerful message, internally and externally, that growth takes time and they're willing to endure it. On the other side, there's urgency, the pressure to win now, the pressure that comes with coaching expectations, the reality that NFL timelines are unforgiving. If leadership begins adjusting course before the original plan fully unfolds, that signals something different, not necessarily panic, but doubt. And doubt spreads. What makes this situation compelling isn't confirmed drama. It's the possibility of friction between long-term investment and short-term pressure, between ownership vision and coaching instinct, between public commitment and private evaluation. Arthur Blank didn't build this roster accidentally. The Falcons' offensive core reflects intention, youth, speed, high ceilings. That kind of structure only works if the quarterback position remains stable long enough for chemistry to develop. Kevin Stefanski, if the reports are even partially accurate, may simply be approaching the situation from a competitive lens. Coaches survive by producing results. Results require consistency. Consistency requires trust in what you see every day in practice. If he feels adjustments are necessary, that doesn't automatically equal sabotage, it could reflect urgency. But urgency and patience rarely coexist comfortably. And here's the truth, in the NFL, whoever controls the quarterback narrative controls the franchise narrative. If Penix is empowered and grows, Atlanta looks unified. If Penix struggles and rumors persist, every earlier whisper will resurface. Analysts will revisit the timeline, fans will question the handling, media will frame it as a missed opportunity. That's how this league works. The most successful organizations eliminate ambiguity early, they make their direction obvious. Players don't guess, coaches don't hedge, the message is clear from the top down. Right now, Atlanta's message feels unsettled. Not chaotic, not broken, just unsettled. And unsettled environments test leadership. They test communication. They test whether belief is strong enough to withstand outside noise. Because the outside noise isn't stopping. Social media debates continue, analysts dissect every rumor, former players weigh in, the conversation has already expanded beyond the building. Which makes the next move critical. If the Falcons publicly reaffirm their commitment and align behind Penix, the story cools. If they introduce ambiguity, even subtly, the conversation intensifies. But zoom out for a moment. This isn't just about one quarterback. It's about how modern NFL franchises balance power, how owners and coaches share control, how young players are developed under scrutiny, how quickly narratives can shape outcomes before games are even played. Atlanta doesn't just need talent. They need clarity. They need a unified direction that players can feel, not just hear in interviews. Because in professional football, talent wins games. But alignment wins eras. And whatever decision comes next won't just define a starter. It will define trust. The league is watching.